In 2010, a Republican by the name of Scott Walker was voted into office as governor of Wisconsin. Now, since that time, he's made many sweeping changes in government, and according to the office of Scott Walker, these changes have resulted in savings of more than $47 million for K-12 schools in the 2011-2012 school year, an extra $288 million in Wisconsin property taxpayers' pockets, and an economic growth forecast that predicts Wisconsin to grow 1.95% over the next 6 months. That's the best economic forecast for the state since 2003. However, he's also passed some legislation that has angered the unions of that state. Because of this, he is facing a recall election during which he'll have to basically run for governor again against the Democratic candidate supported by the unions. Now, there's fierce competition in this state. After looking at many of the different polls, I found them to be inconclusive. Depending on which source you look at, some say that he's going to win, some say that he's going to lose. So that brings us to my claim that Scott Walker will lose the recall election. I'm going to show this through the proof of two minor claims. First of all, that he's lost the voting base of the unions. And second of all, that because parts of his act have been found to be unconstitutional, people will vote against him in the upcoming election. So now for my first point, the fact that he's lost the voting base of the unions. Last spring, Scott Walker passed Act 10, which, according to the Huffington Post, would essentially eliminate public workers' collective bargaining rights. This means that the unions would be unable to bargain over anything except wages. Also, most unions would be unable to deduct dues automatically from their members' pockets, or from their members' wages. Notice that I say most. Certain unions, such as the firefighters union and police officers union, are exempted from this, but more on that later. Of course, angry because of what Scott Walker did, the unions hosted a drive for signatures where they tried to get signatures to host a recall election. And according to CBSNews.com and many other sources, only 540,208 signatures were needed to host the election. However, they were able to get over 900,000 signatures, which is almost twice the number they needed. Therefore, Walker and his Lieutenant Governor, Rebecca Kleefisch, will face a recall election on June 5th. As if this were not enough to show that the unions were against him, the Huffington Post reported that one of his probable opponents, Kathleen Falk, has the backing of at least 6 unions. And this brings us to my second point, that a significant part of the bill that he passed has been found unconstitutional, which turns more people against Scott Walker. Now, recall, as I stated earlier, that some unions, such as the firefighters and police officers unions, were exempted from his bill. Now, incidentally, according to Colorlines.com, these unions threw their support behind Walker during last fall's contentious governor's race. Many people see this as a divide and conquer technique used by Scott Walker to try to divide the unions and keep support. In fact, Russ Feingold, a former Democratic senator, in an article by Colorlines.com, was quoted stating that Walker's bill was a direct attack driven by corporate interests in the state and this country that they have been fantasizing about forever, which is to bust the unions. Well, on April 3rd, 2012, CommonDreams.org announced that a federal judge struck down key provisions of Act 10, Governor Scott Walker's controversial legislation limiting collective bargaining, on the grounds that the arbitrary, possibly politically motivated distinction between public safety and other public employees violated equal protection and First Amendment rights. Now, I'm basing my connection here on a bit of an assumption, which from personal experience I believe I'm justified in taking, that most Americans see politicians as lying, backstabbing people who are unworthy of any trust whatsoever. This being the case, most likely people will see what Scott Walker has done and vote against him in the upcoming election. However, this is also supported by some facts. For example, Colorlines.com announced that in a startling about-face, firefighter and police officers unions who threw their support behind Walker during last fall's contentious governor's race have also joined the protests. Furthermore, the Workday in Minnesota reported Malone Mitchell, the telegenic, fast-talking, knowledgeable president of the Professional Firefighters of Wisconsin, is so far the only declared Democratic candidate for lieutenant governor in the state's special recall election set for June 5th. As you can see, the firefighters and police officers have turned against the governor, even though he created a law that had a loophole designed to maintain their support. Obviously, they were disgusted with his politically motivated actions, and he's lost the support that he previously had. Therefore, I ask you, how can Scott Walker possibly win the recall election if he has lost the support of the unions and has alienated his previous supporters? Thank you. Oh, and by the way, for whoever has me, I actually have the full text of my speech if you want it after class.
All right, the proposition is very clearly stated. You've got a preview of the secondary points that you're going to be talking about. You give us an explanation of the context so we know why there is an argument here. And, you know, it's a prediction, it's a claim of future fact. The one thing that I think is missing is the issue of how important these issues are in the context of the decision on the recall. Clearly, that's what motivated the recall because it's supported by the unions and they're the ones who are upset. However, you start off with a whole opening section about all of the things that are going well with the state, you know, reduced budget deficits, growth in the economy, all those kinds of things. So what percent of the population feels that the union thing is more important than the other issues? I think that's a key question, and it never gets addressed. I know that you found inconsistent information about what public support is on for Walker himself in the election, so it's a little bit hard to estimate there. You know, the key argument that you've got is the notion that the unions that backed Walker have turned on him, despite the fact that he basically, you know, treated them the way they wanted to be treated. You know, it's like if it is a political deal that went through and he followed through with his part of the political deal, now they're turning on him. That seems to be pretty important. However, the proof that they're turning on him seems to be that the one guy who's the head of the firefighters union is running for lieutenant governor, and the leadership has perhaps endorsed the recall. I didn't really hear data on that particular point. I think you needed to have some data on that. But this would be another place where we'd need to know what the attitude of the members is toward Walker or toward their union. I mean, how many police officers and firefighters who are in those unions are likely to change their voting position, or did they even change their voting position? The fact that a union supports somebody doesn't necessarily mean that all their members went one way or the other on this. It means that the money flowed that way. I think that that's the thing that you need to show, is that without the money from the unions, for instance, without the support of those two key unions that you're talking about, especially when it comes to money or boots on the ground in affecting the election, that's where the issue is going to be different. It'll be interesting, and I guess it'll be resolved by the time we're done with the term here. Great. All right, so we'll find out that night. Okay, thank you.